Cool. I am Rantasmo. I host a show on Shapeapocalypse and Channel Awesome called Needs More Gay.
I'm Lindsay, and I co-run Shapeapocalypse, and I am Jamie's overlord. I'm Nella. I'm one of the horsewomen of Shapeapocalypse, and I just like Jamie. He's good. We have credibility.
Well, I just we know who we are, but if not, we're media critics also. I got
Yes.
focused mostly on issues of gender. He focuses more on sexuality. And I have ice cream in my mouth. I gotta balance it somehow so I seem like non-threatening. Keep the ice cube in my mouth so people won't be like, oh, she doesn't sound bossy. She's got an ice cube in her mouth.
I can relate to her. Okay. So, yes, so this panel is about LGBT stereotypes in the media. First off, in case anyone doesn't know what LGBT means, it stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. Yes. But it also comprises a lot of other sexuality and gender identity minorities that aren't necessarily in that acronym, like asexual, queer, pansexual, genderqueer, intersex, and many others. But in the interest of not having a super long acronym, and also because many of these identities aren't really visible in the media at all, so stereotypes don't really show up as such so often as just erasure, which is just them just not. A lot of people don't know what these identities even mean. So they won't come up as often in this particular discussion because we're mostly talking about stereotypes. And a stereotype is a widely held image, idea, or concept of any type of person or thing. And they're often perpetuated by images and stories in the media. They're harmful because they dehumanize minorities by reducing them to a single set of traits. Like, effeminate is often applied to gay men, even though there are both masculine and feminine gay men. And stereotypes reinforce and perpetuate oppressive attitudes as a result. Stereotypes also set unrealistic standards, and especially in the case of positive stereotypes, even those are harmful because if you're a part of that minority and you think, oh, if I'm a gay man, I'm supposed to have like super ripped abs because that's all the gay men I see. That is not really healthy. It's not a healthy standard to set. And as a side note, stereotypes create a blander, more predictable, less rich experience for the audience or the consumer. It just kind of makes for worse media. It's less interesting when it's full of stereotypes. That said, here are some things that we're not saying in this panel. Not saying that characters or media that contain stereotypes, for example, the ones that you're going to see, are necessarily bad. Because a thing has a flaw does not mean the thing is bad and you shouldn't watch it. I'm also not saying that characters in media should never have stereotypical traits. One character or one show or one movie that has a trait isn't necessarily a problem. When most media has that trait, that's when it gets stupid. And that's really when it becomes a stereotype. We're also not saying that if you like a particular character or media that contains stereotypes that you're a bad person who should feel bad. You can like things and also recognize that they have flaws. So first I want to show you a clip. How many people have seen any of the Mannequin movies?
Any of the what?
The Mannequin movies? I'm old. Okay, some people have seen it. So, okay, there's
Young Kim Cattrall.
Yeah. So, okay, in the late '80s and later on the early '90s, there was these movies called the Mannequin franchise, which were about men who fall in love with mannequins who come to life.
Oh.
Wasn't she an ancient Egyptian princess?
Yeah, the first one, she was an ancient Egyptian princess played by Kim Cattrall.
Those blonde Egyptians, you
The
know.
second one, and in the second one, she was like a medieval peasant girl who had a spell cast on her. They weren't smart. But in both movies, there was a character named Hollywood Montrose. And I put together a little montage of clips of this particular character.
Hollywood. Hollywood Montrose. Woo! Doesn't it just sing? Remember, the password is pizzazz. Girls, please, let's not be catty. I simply will not tolerate eavesdropping unless I'm a part of it.
Okay, we need to make a list.
Fire away.
30 feet of black nylon cord.
Ow! Sounds like my kind of list. He said my thighs are too fat. Do my thighs look too fat to you? You didn't look. I have these beads and baubles, mementos of old flames, souvenirs for old Mr. Left Behind Hollywood. Oh, it's just so cheap and tawdry.
Well, at least they thought enough of you to give you the gifts.
I bought them myself. Ah! Run, Jason! Get back! Hey! Run! Stop it right there! Only one little gun. Honey, I am from North Philadelphia.
So, all right. So Hollywood displays a lot of traits that I would call stereotypes. He is flamboyant, and stereotypes that are applied to gay men. He's flamboyant, he is effeminate, he is fashionable, he is especially vain, he's also emotionally volatile, and he is shrieky. He's also awesome, and I love him. So, this is the one character that makes these movies worth watching to me. He is, I mean, I want an entire movie just about Hollywood, which unfortunately this actor, Misha Taylor, passed away last year, very tragically. But I mean, he just breathes life into this role that is, and he's a straight actor, incidentally. Or was a straight actor. But so, I love this character so much, and I think he's one of the coolest gay characters I've ever seen. At the same time, I think it's important to recognize that at the time that these movies were made, it was the late 80s and early 90s, and there weren't a lot of, there were not a lot of gay roles, period, in the media. There were also very few gay men of color in the media. And the roles that did exist for gay black men were often variations on this same archetype, this flamboyant, effeminate, weird fashion-obsessed, shrieking person. I'm not saying those characters should not exist. In fact, I think it's really important that characters like Hollywood do exist because people like Hollywood exist in real life, and they're awesome. It's when all of the characters have those same traits that it becomes a problem. This Nigerian author, Chimamanda Adichie, has this quote I really love where she says, "The problems with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story." The problem with stereotypes isn't that they're wrong. It's not that they're perpetuating falsehoods. It's that they're perpetuating one part of a whole. And if you're not getting that whole, you're not getting the full scope of what that identity encompasses. So I've got a few examples of some of the stereotypes that show up a lot when talking about LGBT people. One is that LGBT people are particularly promiscuous. And I think this kind of comes from the idea of heterosexuality being the default and the sort of neutral, and then you've got this sort of weird thing, and that acknowledges that sex is happening. And I think LGBT people are seen as more sexual as a result of who they are sexually attracted to. So you get a lot of characters that just sleep around or just have a lot of sex with a lot of different people. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that necessarily, but that is a stereotype that is perpetuated. There's also the idea of the butch-femme relationship. This is also kind of reinforces heteronormativity, which is the idea that heterosexuality is, again, the normal default, and then, so with a lot of same-sex relationships in the media, you have the masculine one that represents the man and the feminine one who represents the woman, even if you don't really necessarily need both of those parts in a relationship to be valid. in the case of the birdcage, I mean, Robin Williams is kind of a feminine butch, but he's still, I mean, compared to Nathan Lane's character, he's still very much the man of the relationship. And again, those relationships do exist. Relationships like those do exist in same-sex relationships, but they're not the norm. The gay best friend. This is, so with a lot of gay men in the media, you have the support, you have like supporting gay male role that is sort of there to help out all the straight people. Even in the reality shows, and a lot of the criticisms of Queer Eye for the Straight Guy was that it seemed to reinforce the stereotype that gay men are like assistants to the straight people, and we're just kind of there to make things better for them. And often this character doesn't have any sort of plot line of their own. They're just kind of there to support and give sassy comebacks, and they're just kind of there to as a like sounding board almost. Bisexual or pansexual depravity. With a lot of bisexual and pansexual characters, they're often portrayed as murderers, a lot. And I think this kind of goes to the idea that they'll just do anything, and that includes killing people.
Yeah.
House of Cards.
House of Cards. I've not seen House of Cards, but
Yeah.
Well.
do you want to talk about?
Well, no, we'll finish this in.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I feel like House of Cards is like, despite the fact that it is often very good about showing a more whole human experience, it's definitely a pretty good example of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like bisexuality is special. It's kind of either that, it's like depravity, or erasure, and it's like you pick a side at the end.
I'm sorry, who's who in the characters here? I recognize
So yeah, okay, so this is Frankenfurter from Rocky Horror Picture Show. This is the vampire version of Willow from Buffy.
Would you really call her bisexual though? Because once she was attracted to a woman, and they suddenly go, "Oh, she's a lesbian."
Oh, that's the real version of Willow. This is the alternate dimension version of Willow where she's a vampire. Great show, but that's fine. But yeah, this version of Willow is shown to be involved with both men and women. This, I don't know this character's name actually. He's one of the bosses in the new Dead Rising game.
Oh.
And he like kidnaps both a man and a woman, and it's implied that he's going to do things to them, and then you kill him. This is Tom Ripley, well, Matt Damon playing the role of Tom Ripley from The Talented Mr. Ripley, which is actually a really great movie, and you should watch it. But it is an example of this character is very manipulative and is assuming false identities and killing people and trying to cover it up. He's actually arguably a very sympathetic character, but again, he's a guy who kills people and is. And in the books, it's never really firmly established, but he's implied to be either gay or bisexual, and he does have, most likely bisexual because he does have relationships with women. And this is, I don't know her character's name.
Sharon
Sharon
Stone.
Stone.
No one knows her name.
Sharon
Stone
from,
crotch shot.
Yeah, from Basic Instinct. All right, so this is a special one. I actually did a whole episode on this particular trope. And I have a really hard time defending it, even just as its own isolated when it shows up. This is the idea that transgender people, and especially transgender women, are trying to trick straight men into having sex with them. Mostly it comes up in the form of the main male straight, or a protagonist male straight character will have sex with what he thinks is a woman, and then turns out to be a man in disguise, or discovers that he's had sex with a transgender woman and then barfs. They always barf. I don't know why they barf. Immediately barf.
I like that, like, fucking a dog is okay, but...
Yeah, we're not going to talk about the fact that...
Like, Brian's the one who puked.
He's the one who did something gross.
Yeah, he's the...
Yeah. And spoilers for Ace Ventura. Sorry, everyone.
Yep.
So, all right.
The whole force 20 years, I think we're safe.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
Spoilers for Naked Gun 33 and 1/3.
And going on the same, how many people saw the episode of South Park that aired in the most recent season? I assume people saw it. Well, specifically the one where they addressed the transgender bathroom issue. I think it's debatable how well they handled that particular issue, but of that particular episode, you can say that they were more sympathetic towards trans people than they have been in the past. The next episode, immediately after that, this happened.
Hello, ma'am. Handy car at your service. Climb on in. So, let me ask you a question. Would you like to see my dick?
Sure, would you like to see mine?
Uh-oh! Mindy! Mindy! And I thought a shark was bad.
That's a callback to the fact his character was raped by a shark in a previous episode. But
This is a Doug Walker production.
Immediately after being arguably quite sympathetic towards the issue of trans women and trans men being able to use a bathroom that they felt comfortable in, a character was raped by a transgender woman in a bathroom. Yeah.
It's almost like they don't actually care.
Yeah, it's almost like they have no idea what they're talking about.
It's like, well, if it's South Park, they're going to handle the issue with delicacy and sympathy.
So well to Mrs. Garrison.
Yeah.
And that went on for how many years?
Too long.
But obviously the whole problem with this particular trope is that it reinforces the idea that transgender people are lying and that they're trying to deceive you. This is one particular trope where I wouldn't be unhappy if I never saw it again. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, kind of in summary, before we get into the Q&A portion, we're at a point now where I think media is more diverse than it's ever been before. And when it comes to LGBT people, we're seeing more representations and more different kinds of representations than we have ever really seen before. I also think there's a lot of room for us to improve, which is what I would like to happen. Yeah. So I guess let's kind of open it up. Does anyone have any questions?
Who's who here?
Okay, this is, character is Titus Andromedon from the Netflix series The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. He's kind of like the updated version of Hollywood Montrose, and he's actually played by a gay actor.
Do you guys remember 30 Rock? You remember DeFwan from was it The Queen of Jordan? It's that guy.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's that gay actor. And he's actually he's a very main role in the show, much more so than Hollywood Montrose was in the movies.
I love DeFwan.
This is the cast of Orange is the New Black, which I have not actually seen, but
It's like, well, that's one of his Patreon goals. Like,
yes.
I'm kidding.
No, it's not. I will do it at some point for sure. And it includes various queer and trans characters. This is what's the character's name? Does anyone watch Revenge? Know who this guy is?
No.
Okay, this is a character on the show Revenge who is bisexual. This is Connor and Oliver from the show How to Get Away with Murder. Nolan, that's this guy's name, Nolan. This is the Mulan from Once Upon a Time, who is gay Mulan on the show.
Yeah, she totally is in love with Sleeping Beauty, but then they totally cocked it up.
They better bring her back. I'm so mad about this.
Right?
They had her join Robin Hood's gang when Robin Hood's gang
Spoilers,
was going to be like a big...
spoilers.
And dropped her. Why? I'm so mad. I'm sorry. This is like my big thing. I'm so sorry.
The Wicked Witch dies.
I did see your episode.
Yeah, apparently she just came back. I was just like, even when I did that, I knew she was coming back, but then I was like, eh.
The evil queen is evil, and then she's good, and then she's evil again, and then she's good, and then she's kind of gray, and then she's good, and then...
That's the entire series.
This is Barbara Gordon from Gotham. Who in this continuity is bisexual, and this is, I forget this character's name.
Montoya.
She's from
Montoya?
Major Crimes.
Well, in this show, she's a cop, and I believe is a lesbian.
Renee Montoya?
Yeah,
Montoya?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
She's also a police officer who's gay as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. And this is from Orphan Black. Orphan Black is, if you haven't seen Orphan Black, it's about clones, predominantly female clones. This particular character is Tony, who is a trans male clone. Okay. Any questions or comments? Are you? Oh. Okay.
He's
You're taking
yeah.
Okay. Anyone have anything?
I was just wondering what your thoughts are on it, because I've kind of noticed, I, as you can tell by my violent reactions and a lot of things, I take my media very seriously. I really, really care about it, so I end up talking with people a lot about it. And there's this one thing I've noticed, it's kind of like sort of like a pushback against stereotypes, where it goes a little too far in the other direction, where people start to become a little overly negative of anybody that shows any type of stereotypes in the media. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that and how that affects things.
Honest question. Do you spend a lot of time on Tumblr? Like, and I'm not, yeah, and I'm not being like, you know, catty. I'm like,
Yeah,
just.
but most of the pushback I'm talking about is on like IMDb and talking to people in person.
Really?
Like that. Some of
How
it's
much
on
time do they
Tumblr,
spend
but
on
most of it
Tumblr?
is on- yeah.
I've not had good
But
experience with
the
IMDb.
specific ones I'm talking about is mostly on like IMDb or like I'm talking to somebody in person. or
Well, I
something
think
like that.
it's kind of like just it's less about the media itself and more about people's increasing inability to see shades of gray in pernicious things that they may feel threatened by. Like even like when it was like you kept you know, it's like the fact that we have to say because a stereotype exists does not mean it's inherently harmful, or just because you like a thing doesn't mean you're a bad person. And there is definitely this sort of undercurrent that is becoming increasingly loud in some circles that is, yes, you are a bad person. If you like, I mean, that's just like the sort of like the whole underlying, you know, thread behind your fave is problematic. I hate that Tumblr so much because it's like it doesn't exist to critique problematic behavior. It exists to shame you and say, yes, you are a bad person. And I think that it's like even like, you know, with like Anita and, you know, Feminist Frequency, like she'll say at the beginning of every video, it's like, we're going to talk about a thing now. Just because we're talking about it doesn't mean the whole thing is bad, and it doesn't mean you're bad if you like it. And people just do not
So you're
listen.
saying the whole thing is bad. And just to be clear.
And you're saying I'm a bad person for liking
Yeah, and it's like, and that inability to just like hold two truths at the same time is, I mean, I can't even really put a finger on whether it's a cultural thing or just a human thing or just like the way you were raised. Some people can do it, some people can't. Some people will learn to do it, some people never will. But it's a big problem. Like the fact that you say like, I want to talk about this piece of media, like Once Upon a Time, show you might like and watch, or even Game of Thrones. Like I love Game of Thrones. There were some huge fucking problems with season 4. And like especially with the showrunners not realizing they filmed a rape scene. And it's just like, it doesn't mean I hate Game of Thrones all of a sudden, but it doesn't, I'm also going to point that out and be like, hey, you cocked up. But that, you know, it's a wider thing that, you know, I'm not sure how to fix it. Just say like, hey, multitudes, hold them in you.
No, I mean, I think there's a place. I mean, again, I think there's a place for characters who do conform to stereotypes. I just don't want that to be all we see. Yeah.
I guess just like another aspect of it is just it seems like people, when they do that, they target certain stereotypes. Like people will complain about if an effeminate gay man is on there, but then not only will they not have a problem with it, but they'll hold up the equally stereotype of the super masculine but in the closet and reacting with homophobia.
Yeah.
Well, it's like we were talking about the earlier panel, which, you know, I know some of you are at with like the more than meets the eye. There's like, and yes, we're gonna have a serious discussion about Transformers.
Yes, we are.
There's one. There is what, like in the current comic run, there is one gay couple, and that, you know, they're male-coded robots that are in a romantic relationship, and somewhat early on, one of them dies, and there was sort of a pushback, like, well, here we go. Of course, you know, it's like queer couple. Of course, we got to be tragic. One of them's gonna die, and it was like, but well, they are the only couple, and it's like, well, and it was like, well, is that an issue? Is this contributing to a negative thing to say like, well, if we're going to have queer-coded relationships, they are always going to end tragically, and that's just the nature of the beast? Or did that make for good drama and a good story? And it's like kind of the answer is both, you know. And you know, it's like, and then eventually like there's like an alternate universe, and then they come back and now they're having marital problems, and so it's like, okay, that makes it good, not really, but you know. You back there.
I was gonna say, like, a problem is also probably when people aren't ready to fail. Like, they want to try and be like, oh yeah, get these gay characters out there, even if I'm just using it for this like tragic plot line. Yeah, that sucks, but like they're not ready
Yeah.
try, they get like really defensive.
Well, have you noticed like this atmosphere, like this increasingly polarized atmosphere? I'd say one of the most common messages or letters or fan mail that I get is, I want to write, and I'm like, I'm white, or I'm male, or I'm straight, and I'm afraid of doing something problematic. And I want to write from a point of view that isn't mine, but I don't know what to do. And then on the other side, you have people like the sad puppies, you know, like or is it the rabid puppies and the sad puppies that are like going out of their way to be offensive, you know, and saying like, yes, we are going to hold up this default of like straight white men going into space and not being political, except for in the political way that we like. And like, and it's a sort of strange, increasing like polarization of people who are afraid to do because they're afraid of being called out. They genuinely don't want to hurt anybody, so they don't do anything. And then there are the people who want to just shit all over progress because they don't like it, because it makes them less. So they say, I have a lot of feelings. You back there.
Wait, sorry, just to follow up. I mean, it is, yeah, I would say, don't worry about what if people say I am racist, homophobic, sexist. They're going to, and that's okay.
Yep.
As long as you are critical of, like, look back and be critical, okay, what can I do better next time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if someone is shitty enough to bring the entirety of your existence down to one thing that you said without giving you the opportunity to grow from it, then that's kind of on them. Like if you double down and say like, no, I was right, and then just do that, then yeah, you are kind of shitty, or at least didn't listen, you know. But yeah, you keep wanting to say something.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh no! Like you kept raising your hand, and like, man, this is gonna be good. Oh man, he's
Okay, so like, you know, now we're witnessing a lot of animated series highlight LGBTQ characters, but it's still kind of done in a way where it's, I don't want to say it's ambiguous, but it's still kind of like that.
It's only clarified after the fact.
After the fact,
Yeah.
like, you know, with
like
Korra,
Korra, yeah.
Yeah.
Korra, now recently with Steven
Steven
Universe.
Universe.
It's really kind of like a revolutionary, you know, series right now because it's highlighting characters who are queer, you know, in a way where I feel that it's not kind of like, I don't know what's down your throat, but basically the question I wanted to ask is that how do you feel about family-based animated series dealing with LGBTQ topics, and how can we kind of progress forward with that, you know?
You're the one
This
who
is
watched it.
this is actually something we were discussing Friday. I actually gave him a crash course in Steven Universe because I was like, this shit's gonna come up and you need to watch it. So I find it fascinating if you compare Korra to Steven Universe, because I think it also comes down to the creators and also the understanding that they are making a creation that is very much a part of an industry. And when you look at Korra, and I do believe that the writers, when they say like, we kind of always thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we shipped Korra with Asami? And then they had that moment of like, can we ship Korra with Asami? Like, can we make that happen? And that worry and concern of getting the pushback and then it would get shot down. Like, I buy that 100%. Because when you look at how many people will freak out about my children's programming as being corrupted by the gay agenda.
Did you see that, like, was it Rob Riggle in Russia, where he's like, the guy's like, how do I explain to my children what, like, if there's two men dropping off their son at school, and he's like, that those kids have two daddies.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, how do I explain that? And I'm like, I just did.
And then, and then what you have is, you as a creator have this idea, but you've got to get the clearance from the industry who has a market in a place that's not American. Just even looking at the market in America. Like,
well, I mean, these are two different, like, Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon
are also
have very different, like, sets of freedom. Like,
yeah.
Cartoon Network has way more freedom
because
to do what they
Nickelodeon is
want.
a children's network.
Basically Disney.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
You know?
And Cartoon Network, let's face it, has always kind of been like cartoons for adults, like for your teenagers.
And I think part of it might have to do with again, I think we brought this up to the other panel as well, but international markets, they're not just having to deal with this country, they're having to deal with other countries that are often have more conservative values.
Right.
Now, sorry.
Go ahead.
What I would say is then, well, let's look at the imagery and what you can, as someone who identifies, or even if a kid, you're sort of wondering and like feeling isolated and stuff, like, let's take two examples. What's going to make you feel like there are people like you? The ending scene of Korra or that Dumbledore is gay, according to J.K. Rowling? Like, what is actually more representative? Now, mind you, like, the ending of Korra has a really clear, like, visual between the wedding of Varric, like, and Julie, and then Asami and Korra mirroring the exact same imagery, like, straight up, like.
Also mirrored the end of, I think, season 1, where.
Oh yeah, and it mirrored the ending.
Guitar.
So like, I mean, and the soft music, and like like people even pointed out like the background is the bisexual flag colors, you know? Like, how much more explicit with symbolism can you get?
But at the same time, it sucks that we have to use symbolism.
Well, yeah, and then it goes like, and then it's almost like, what is this, the freaking Hays Code? But then again, it's children's
These
programming.
flowers represent love.
Yeah.
It's like Bollywood with the two roses.
It's like two men are living together and they're bachelors, like in the 30s movie, like symbolism. So yeah, of course, like I think we do have to acknowledge that there is. I'm sure creators are chomping at the bit, like, or even when you look at Gravity Falls, and they very much wanted explicitly to have a god of love, like make an old lesbian couple like come together, and then it got changed on them. And I think
Gravity Falls is Disney, right?
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. And I think it's interesting, though, what I find fascinating is that you have the team of Korra and Gravity Falls after the fact coming out and explicitly saying, this is what we wanted, this is what we did, like, I will show you storyboards. Yeah. And I think what we're starting to see is a lot of creators being unafraid.
I think they're just bored with heteronormativity.
Well, that too.
Like,
but
to
also,
state
I
the
mean,
obvious. That's all we've had for the history of always, except for ancient Greece, sort of.
Well, or at least like what's been discussed in polite society, and but you more creators are just willing to just straight out say, well, this was our intention. We know that the execution wasn't what we wanted, and certainly not what you wanted. So that dialogue's really changing, which is great.
Well, at least for the core of it, I remember hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you guys know any better, they specifically said that they approached Nick staff, and with the specific changes that they proposed, that they were able to put in the show, and they never got a specific pushback. They had fears. They wanted to go further, but they pulled themselves back a bit and had no problems with what they did put forward.
But that was also it wasn't on the network anymore.
Yeah, it wasn't.
It was streaming.
That is true.
But by the time they made those decisions for that season, it was just streaming. Then didn't they technically bring it back for the seson finale? No, maybe.
No, it was streamed.
Yeah.
And I think they still put it on the reruns on the
I don't know.
networks, maybe, like, on
But like then that like the whole chorus situation is like weird and fascinating.
Yeah.
Like
Okay. Now.
Just a lot of the stuff here, a lot of the stereotypes and pushback and everything that we do see in media, and as we're seeing in culture, like with the rabbit puppies and sad puppies, who are just total creeps. And a lot of creepy stuff here on Tumblr that is on a certain side of it. A lot of it tends to go towards the narrative of the victimized straight white male, or in some flavorful cases, the straight white female. What are your
That's really, like, that happens. It's rare, but like you talk about, like, Kathy Brennan, I'm afraid if I say her name, she'll, like, appear.
a puff of red smoke like a wicked witch. Who accused me?
I seriously, I was like, I tweeted her name. Like, I didn't tag her. And then my next tweet was like, she's going to come fucking find me, isn't she? 10 minutes later.
She just sits there Googling her.
So anyway,
what are your thoughts on that particular narrative? As it does show up definitely in our culture, like when we're saying, well, the gays are corrupting our media. Well, damn right we are. But
There's just the existence of gay people is. People will say that the existence of gay people is injecting politics into.
Yeah,
And the
they
thing
love
is-
people like Milo, who like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like as if you toe the party line. If you're one of the good gays who, doesn't, care about people who are like you.
The politics are already there, and the politics that are there are the politics of the status quo. Yeah, it's not.
Okay, George R.R. Martin 2 days ago, because he, bless his ancient heart, still blogs on a live journal.
Isn't that adorable though?
No, it's precious.
Have you guys read Joyce Carol Oates' Zanga blog?
It's grrm.livejournal.com, and it's his most recent post. And
The blog to the north.
yeah. All hail the blog in the north. So he writes this this basically responds to, because this is like the Sad Puppies, this is not the first time they've done it. It's the first time they've succeeded because they had help from Gamergate. So if you guys don't know about the Sad Puppies thing, yeah, I feel the same way, and I've already ranted I've gotten my anger out 2 panels today. But basically, are you guys familiar with the Hugo Awards? They're the most prestigious award in science fiction fantasy publishing. So there's this guy named Vox Day, who's I think one of 2 people who's ever been kicked out of SIFWA for just being shitty. Huge racist, neo-Nazi sympathizer, whatever. They kicked him out. He's John Scalzi? John Scalzi? Anyone? He's a sci-fi author. He was president of SIFWA. They kind of have this sort of one-sided war going on where Vox Day has decided to declare war on John Scalzi for being a smooth jazz Waluigi. And social justice warrior.
Social justice warrior.
He votes Democrat. Long story short, these guys created an approved slate of straight white male authors that wrote, science fiction and fantasy that was pure. It was not, no progressive agenda, anything like that. No female protagonist, stuff like that. It was Robert Heinlein was too progressive for them. That's how crazy these people are. And so this was the first time that there were certain categories in the Hugos that were 100, it was something like 83% of their approved list got nominated, which is insane. And there were some categories that, novella, 3 of them were by John C. Wright, who's heard of him? And that was approved list, and all of short story, all of novelette, all of...
John C. Wright, incidentally, is, he wrote a very vitriolic screed after the finale of Korra, saying, why is this filth on our television and all these horrible things.
So yeah, he's nominated for 3 Hugos in Best Novella this year. Cheers. These people were pushing. The reason they wanted to take over the Hugos was because the Hugos have been taken over by the SJW agenda. I hate that term. It's so hard to say. We need to take it back. And so George R.R. Martin just, in his George R.R. Martin way says all right, I'm going to take some statistics for the last 10 years of the Hugos and explain to you idiots why you're wrong. And then he just kind of does this very, very long, here's who got nominated, here are their politics, I know all these people, and here's why it hasn't really changed at all. The representation hasn't really changed much in the Hugos over the last 20 years. Here are the numbers, here's who got nominated. And then just kind of goes on to say, the point being, this is in your head. This idea of a culture war is your paranoid conspiracy because the numbers don't add up to what you're saying. You're the culture war. Yeah. But they're still pushing it, and now it's there's this big debate in the science fiction community about we can't play their game, there's some categories that it's no one can win, or they've already won, and it's just well, what do we do? And I was I don't know. It was really shitty what happened, but it's just that idea, the narrative of the victimized straight white guy. It's I guess the idea that they feel like they're losing privilege, and that is kind of
you guys know you're winning, right?
Yeah, it's
or you are at least in the lead right now.
The fact that it's you're still way in the lead, and it's you don't lose anything, but the fact that other people might gain something is so threatening that yes, they do feel the need to do this, and this is being fed so much by
Fox News.
And the internet equivalent thereof, which is so much more effective at converting the young you know, let's be real. So yeah, that was my long and winding way of saying, yes, I know. That the victimization thing is such, it's seductive. It's seductive though. Like there are these kids that like, you come. Dan Olson, everyone. Our website's professional hornet
spends
kicker.
time in the red pill.
Yeah. So he's a hornet nest kicker.
Why do they believe they're being victimized, Dan?
Because they're fragile and they've been raised in an environment of toxic masculinity that leaves them with an incredibly narrow range of acceptably masculine behaviors, generally focused in aggression, stoicism, violence as a solution to problems, and a narrative where they are expected to be the active party in all things, whether that be sex, romance. They are the pursuers, they are the hunters, they are to be these things, the leaders, the not caregivers, providers, and that unrealistic weight, unrealistic pressure, which is also so narrowly defined, leaves them with very few options for expressing themselves. It leaves them with very few options for healthy emotional release. It leaves them with very few options for connecting with other human beings on a level of vulnerability, which is a universal experience. All of us feel vulnerable at some time. Like, you want to talk biotruth, there's a biotruth. Like, that's an actual one. People feel vulnerable. People get sad. People are happy. People experience a vast range of emotions. But because they don't have healthy outlets for that, it sets up basically a crystal prison where their lives are, they cannot achieve what they're being told they must, and so they're set up to fail emotionally, often financially, and just practically, and in.
I think also there is a lot of valid anger in the social justice community.
Yeah.
And whenever these kids go online and they see, like, they'll joke about like being called cis scum, and that's why I hate the SJWs, but it's like that anger is real and it's there, and like when they see it and they're like, oh, so they think I'm the enemy just because I exist.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, not quite, but I think that's kind of true for some of them.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely went through a sort of phase like that in my growth, where I was, the terrifying thing for me with Gamergate is that I see myself in it. Like, if we rolled back to, say, 1998, 1999, and Gamergate had happened there, I would totally be, I would be sitting there in Mundane Matt's live streams on Sargon's streams, being like, yeah, man, screw the feminists, because I got caught up in a lot of the straw versions of feminism, the straw versions of a lot of things, and I held those as truths, even if they weren't and aren't. And it makes you, extra vulnerable. Basically, these boys are trapped in a narrative where the cards for success in a cooperative relationship are stacked against them. They can't win because they're being fed conflicting narratives, which are both just utter bullshit. And it's an endless ream of lies that they're trying to live. They're trying to live a life that can't exist.
And instead of saying this is bullshit, they go, no, you're wrong.
Yeah. Because.
And they feel victimized by people's anger.
Yeah.
And it falls upon.
Because the
everyone
thing is,
who's not the default to be the reasonable one.
The big thing is that the narrative that they're getting is coming from the societal default. That narrative is the societal default. And so, you see a lot of them who fall back on naturalistic sort of fallacies, where it's like, oh, the way that things are is the natural consequence of the world just unfolding. And so, white male dominance, something like what's the word I'm looking for, where we go and take over other countries and just exploit their resources? Imperialism, colonialism. Imperialism, that imperialism is just sort of the natural fallout of like just the way things are, and that's the way things are. And so because of this message of like, you know, men are supposed to be this, because that's coming from the societal default, they elevate it above, you know, these other conflicting the things that conflict with, and go like, and they continue to chase it even if all of the data that they're getting through experience is like, no, you're chasing an illusion. You know, that thing that you want, that man that you're trying to be, is destroying you. You know, physically, emotionally. You know, it's crippling your relationships. It's something that you don't even want to be. You know, you don't want to be the jock. Maybe the jock doesn't even want to be the jock. Like, no one wants to be that guy. No one wants to be a Chad. But you're still chasing, you know, Chad is not a thing that anyone should want to be, but you're still kind of trying to be as Chad as you could be because that's what you're supposed to be, even if you think Chad's a douche.
I think it ties back into, like, when you look, I'm trying to bring it back. Like, right now we're in a period because of social media where a lot of people, young, old, educated, just coming into it for the first time, and like, as we like to joke about Tumblr, it's, you know, baby's first social justice like class 101.
They don't fact check. It drives me insane.
I know. But I think what we're in a period of is a lot of people, old, young, new, experienced, getting a lot of information, be it true or wrong, and the thing about truth and realizing what other people are going through and learning about injustice, be it real or perceived, is that it makes you angry. And there is a lot of anger, be it in that, you know, social justice warrior camp or in the other side. And it's like politics, you know, it's not about being correct, it's about winning. And I think that's why diversity and representation, you know, of all flavors is perceived as as so dangerous. And I really do think it's perceived as dangerous.
Because
I don't
it means
think it's
things
any-
have to change. And
Yes.
change is scary.
Well, I don't think it's any coincidence that like Gamergate and Sad Puppies happened this year, when this is like, you know, like it or not, this is the most diverse media's ever been, you know, and the fact that this blowback is happening now when they are so threatened by the default, like, you know, changing so quickly, especially in television, you know.
Well, also, I want to open up a question, sort of. So we talk about this media on television, but what does that mean? You know, because in your examples, you gave two that are Netflix, and you have to pay extra money to watch Netflix. And then, well, what about things like HBO or other series like that? Well, you got to pay more money for that as well. Like, so where's the representation really coming across strongest? And are we seeing...
Netflix costs a lot less than a cable
No,
subscription.
absolutely, but that's also true. Like, and I think we need to play the game of follow the money, because I think people are hungry for something, and alternate providers, we're in this glorious age where you can find an alternate provider of content you want. And it's scaring the crap out of the industry.
We're like
There's
the
also,
most...
just like YouTube, where, I mean, a lot of people are watching YouTube. I don't know if you've noticed that. And that's something where there's really no barrier to what you can, within a certain level of reason, there's very little barrier to what you can do. There's no one saying, hey, don't have that gay person on your show, or don't have...
I mean, there's that YouTube adaptation of the lesbian vampire story of Camilla.
Well, I don't know. I think that might be because
There's definitely been a diversity problem in the creators that YouTube chooses to promote.
That is true.
And like, especially when you look at like their big their big push last year. It was like, I believe it was Michelle Phan, Bethany something, and some other white girl. And it was like two white girls and one Asian girl, and they all looked basically identical in the pictures that were chosen. And then
whenever, like, I think someone did a rundown of like the 1 month of the YouTube Twitter, which has so many, like 22 million followers, something like that, and then like the percentage of people of color that at the end of the month, not including people like Rihanna and like major huge pop stars, it was something like 2 or 3% of the people that were promoted on the YouTube Twitter. So, and that's a big deal of like who will end up as like the YouTube stars. They tend to be people like John Green, and like I feel like I look at Andre, who I think might be the most I don't know, he might be the most famous black guy on YouTube, or maybe Glozell, not guy, but
Glozell.
Yeah.
Probably Glozell.
Glozell Green. Like I'm just I'm like Andre, I think you might be it, because and he doesn't get promoted by YouTube. I mean, I think he might by his network, but certainly not by YouTube.
One of the things when it comes to Netflix, and part of the reason why we're seeing greater diversification in realms like Netflix, and if you are following the money, Netflix represents something separate or unique from cable television, broadcast television, and even subscription television like HBO, because they have access to a wealth of demographic data that has never before existed in the history of mankind. Because whenever you're sitting there and when they get you to sit down and be like, hey, who are you? What's your name? What do you like? What did you think about this show? What did you think about that show? And they're pulling this data. It's like, oh, you clicked on this show and then you watched one episode and then went to something else. And then you started this movie, you watched 20 minutes and went to something else. Then you started this show and watched 4 seasons and then rewatched the first season, jumped to a couple episodes in season 3, and then watched something, before you went and watched something else.
And they have all your Facebook info
and they've
too.
got and they've got all this integration,
it's
and
like
they're
cementation.
pulling all of this data and they're collating it, and so they know who you are. They know the interests and demographics and basically what they need to make in order to get eyeballs, and so they're producing content straight for Netflix that is custom targeted, drug-like.
It's like what the Nielsen
products.
box wanted to be.
It is beyond what the Nielsen box inventors would jizz their pants at what Netflix is able to do. Like the data that it is able to cull from the behaviors of the people involved, because it's insane and it's ridiculous and it's highly invasive, and at the same time it is creating like weaponized targeted content in almost the greatest way possible, because you look at something like House of Cards,
it's just
and
market.
it's like it's just
like
it's
the
so,
market has spoken, puppies.
the market is spoken, and it is
Capitalism,
it's laser focused. Like something like House of Cards was the first Netflix original series, and it is you cannot think of a series that is more like that's the Netflix audience, followed by Hemlock Grove, Orange is the New Black, BoJack Horseman. And so on and so on.
And coming out soon is a show where it's Jane Fonda and I believe Lily Tomlin and their husbands break up with them and start dating each other, and then they're all 4 of them are kind of dealing with that. It looks great.
Sorry. Did you have something to talk
Oh wow, yeah, we need to wrap it up soonish, but yeah.
What you were saying earlier, we were talking about YouTube. I know you were talking about Patreon earlier. I don't know if you guys have a Patreon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
But I've noticed that now we're also getting this boom of like crowdfunding for a lot of independent web series and independent content. But what's kind of disappointing about it is that I've seen a lot of shows that are more focused on representing LGBTQ people of color, and typically they get a fraction of the funding that more predominantly white series.
Yeah, was it like Sargon of Akkad gets like what, $4,000 a month? Or just in real life shit where, a pizza place pretty much makes like a cool million almost by like saying, well, we don't want to serve pizza to gays at their wedding. And then a bunch of people are like, no, they're gonna lose business. Quick, crowdfund them.
I mean,
like,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh God. Oh yeah, they got
crowdfunding.
Some third party started a GoFundMe and they raised over $1 million.
Right.
Yep.
But just in reference to what you were talking about, there's a lot of racism within the LGBT community that needs to be addressed. Yes. Just that.
But I'm guessing, like, how could that be changed? Because, like I said again, we are living in this revolutionary time when it comes to media content.
Yeah. Well, I think there's also a fundamental distrust of any, like, I think it's like the fact that, like, one of the big Gamergate narratives is whenever you see a woman that has a Patreon and they love to go after that, even though they have Patreons too. But that's sort of like this distrust of, like, you are using your, you know, oppressed status to get money. And then it kind of goes in layers that it's like, oh, well, if the further you go from the default, there's that sort of like distrust of like, well, why are you doing this? Why can't you get a real job? And that narrative will get pushed more than if it's just some, you know, white dude like who's drawing pictures of horses. I don't know, whatever it is white guys do on Patreon.
And I've also seen a lot of infighting within sort of the liberal community, the social community.
Wasn't there
people
one
saying
that was
it's like, oh well, Patreon
did
like
something wrong.
is just another tool of, you know.
It's called Patreon.
Yeah, it's just another tool.
It's almost patriarchy.
It's just, you know, because Patreon or whatever are not, say, sufficiently or are not as aggressive in policing the stuff that they support internally. Because I mean, Patreon, like, they profit off of Sargon. They profit off of the cottage industry of anti-feminism.
Yeah, like way more than the other way around.
And they do. And so the fact that they're not as willing as, you know, the social justice community would like in kicking people like that off of their services or denying them services, you know, people are just like, oh, well, they're just a tool, like they're just using. But it's like at the same time, it's like, well, it's an infrastructure problem, and if you're not going to trust infrastructure, you know, you're gonna have to make some deals with the devil if you're gonna end up on Netflix.
There's all these infighting also within like crowdfunding with even not even like issue stuff or just stuff that is intentionally diverse. And I can't remember the name of it. It wasn't a Patreon. It was an Indiegogo that caused a big kerfluffle on Tumblr because I can't even remember. But it was like someone did something arguably wrong that. You know, it was like they had a white voice actor voice a non-white person, and then they like, oh, you lied. You said it was going to be. Do you remember? I was like, do you remember the thing? It was an animated thing.
Is it Urban?
Yeah, it's like Urbex. Urbans? Yes.
Which company it was, but ICE has set up an account with a crowdfunding source.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's also, like, social, just in general, like, any social justice or just leftist, like, any non-straight white guy, it's like, they're just so distrustful of the infrastructure, and so they're going to be a lot more selective, and that, in and of itself, is a problem whenever you have people like Sargon, who people just throw their money at him because he exists, like, yes.
They've got a good reason to be, you know, suspicious of power structures, because power structures through their lives have shit on them at every available opportunity, and it's like, and we're in a year where, like, I mean, black men are being shot.
Yeah,
basically.
a lot. And then there's like, that distrust, like even in like that major narrative, like, oh, what did you do? Why? What were you doing wrong? That I was like, even like that snuff film that just got put on the New York Times, you know, and then like the police were just lying.
And it's
about,
like, so
and then people just bought it.
To distrust power structures, but at the same time, it's like you're gonna have to trust some of them, because otherwise you're not going to work with anyone, and if you go at it alone, you're just going to be crushed by the unending weight of the universe.
So what we're babbling about is ultimately there's so many uphill battles for anyone who is not the default, is basically what, especially for crowdfunding.
Do we have to wrap up?
No.
Oh, okay.
Sweet.
All right.
Let's keep going.
I'll give you 15.
Oh, actually, pink shirt, because you haven't.
Okay. What'd you say?
Oh no, I said pink shirt because she hasn't
okay,
spoken
sorry.
yet. So
how do you feel about something like Glee, whose mission is to address every single issue everybody could ever possibly have in every factorial? Like, I can never tell if I feel like it's more helpful or pandering, and how important that is.
I think network shows are dumb and like.
I honestly
really
stopped
tacky
watching
and poorly
Glee.
written.
I forget when it was, but it was. Yeah. I mean, certainly they mean well, and I can appreciate the effort.
They're not a very good show.
Yeah, it's just not a very good show, honestly. I think the fact that they tackled those issues at all is definitely good. I'd like to see them handled more better.
We also need to just be honest about the fact that network has a way older audience than something like Netflix, you know, which is like, was it the most watched show on television is, it's NCIS. No, it's NCIS, isn't it?
It was 2.5 Men.
It was 2.5 Men. And their average age is like 55. So it's like when you have a show like Glee that's running into that, it's like, well, obviously they are going to write their, you know, issue narrative in the simplest, easiest to swallow means as possible. And so it's even like you have like, you know, what was it, Sam Smith, who's real popular now, and it's just like, he's popular with moms. And that's the same way with Glee. It's like, moms like Glee because it's inoffensive.
He has that
and
song
easy.
that doesn't actually mention any genders, but it's about love, and everyone loves love.
Yeah, it's like he's...
We replaced baby.
It's not in your face, so it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's just like there's so many moms that just, you know, they're like, I can ignore that he's gay.
And I think it's important to say that, you know, having a character who's LGBT and having their sexuality or gender identity not be a big deal doesn't make them a better character. It makes them more comfortable. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are a better representation. I think there's a place for both the characters where their identity is more incidental and where it's a huge, big plot point. I think we kind of need a mix of both.
Yeah. From a writing standpoint, like we need a media environment where you have, you know, you do have the NBD kind of characters where it's like, oh, their status, their whatever, their
like, by the way, I'm gay. Okay, cool. Let's go fight these
accepting.
aliens.
And then you do need something, you know, more radical, more challenging, that, you know, basically grittier, that is like, hey, life for people of color in America is bullshit.
So, I was gonna say, Glee is a great example, and I also talk about Princess and the Frog in this term, because like Disney made Princess and the Frog, and they finally made a black princess, and I feel like after that they just gave up. They just like did not give a shit.
Well, we had her one.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like that was Princess and the Frog did not. I mean, that was kind of like Disney's Hercules. Like it didn't make the money that they wanted it to make, so they just punished it by sweeping it under the rug.
I know you've talked about this, Lindsay, where basically if a movie stars women or, you know, stars people who are, you know,
anything other than white dudes,
then that must be the reason that movie didn't do well.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much pressure, like, okay, this movie has like a super diverse cast, it has to do really well, because if it doesn't, that means that diversity was the problem.
Yeah. Like, I hate to state the obvious, Princess and the Frog wasn't very good. Like, I mean, it had its moments, but it was the same.
I like that song.
Sorry. Start a debate about
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, just like, but yeah, that mean.
I've got a great example of this ecosystem. Okay, so Assassin's Creed cost $35 million. Assassin's Creed 1 cost $35 million to produce. Then Mirror's Edge cost $37 million to produce. So we're talking basically the same level of budget. They came out a year apart from each other. The critical reception for both of them was pretty much about the same, where everyone sort of said, like, you know, good first run, looking forward to the sequel where they hammer out the problems. However, the marketing budget for Assassin's Creed 1 was $120 million, and the marketing budget for Mirror's Edge was 12. One of these has 7 sequels. The other one is getting its first sequel next year. And so the failure of Mirror's Edge, like the sales failure of Mirror's Edge, was 100% blamed on, like, oh, well, it's because of the female protagonist. You know, and yet it received like a fraction of the marketing budget. It was set up to fail. And that's not on the developers and the work that they did. That's on the publishers.
Warner Brothers is notorious for this.
Well, just going back to Assassin's Creed, like when you had the storyline of the Creole black female pirate captain assassin, and everyone was like, oh yeah, and then they released it on the Vita. That was the only way to play her storyline, and then everyone was like, well, obviously women don't belong in the Assassin's Creed universe. Well, pardon me for not owning a fucking Vita!
I'm not one of the 12. Comment on your note about the difference between those two games. I've read something on Tumblr about how the reason Kingsman and Jupiter Ascending.
Go on. She's got a lot of feelings. It's okay. She's got feelings.
The thing I saw said the reason one did so poorly because Jupiter Ascending was escapism for girls and Kingsman was escapism for boys.
Well, there's a lot of elements at play with Jupiter Ascending, but not the least of which the fact that it was released in February and it got like hacked to pieces and like when they recut it, there's a lot. I mean, but I do think that I don't know that the escapism element really played into it, but I do think that the combination of like sci-fi adventure with female protagonist equals Nope for a lot of moviegoers, and that is a huge shame. But I mean, there was a lot at play there. Like maybe if it had a decent marketing campaign and came out in a real month.
Actually, there's one other thing. Also, Jupiter Ascending was original. Kingsman was an adaptation from a Mark Miller property.
Yeah.
So then you have, you've also got like original versus adaptation.
Also, like I think they might have ended. How much like Jupiter Ascending cost like 5 times as much to make, and
because it's a fucking space opera
and also a disaster. I mean, the reason it cost, it was like the reason the budget was so inflated was because they kept cutting it and reshooting it. Well, anyway, that's a different story. But like, there were a lot of elements at play, but I do think that was one of them. And I think that not making money wasn't necessarily an escapist thing, but I do think that it was received with more skepticism because of that. Because people will look at female power fantasies and go, nah. That's why people will be so much more eager to call a female character a Mary Sue than they would like, I don't know, Luke Skywalker or Batman, Like, people are just kind of suspicious of female characters who are, exist.
Well, chosen boys that's just the way the world works, isn't it?
Boys are chosen and women are prizes.
Well, I'm a little cautious myself. You mentioned earlier about writers writing characters that
Are you one of the thousands who've written to me?
Not yet, but who have different origins or different character traits to themselves. And I want to write a science fiction opera where the main character is an elderly Native American woman. And some of the supporting characters are an intersex couple and a white man who is a black supremacist and wants to transform into a black woman.
It's got like is it Steve Martin's character in The Jerk?
I was born a poor black boy in Mississippi.
I mean, I think this is kind of the dilemma. How do you make diverse media if you yourself are not a part of the group that you're writing about?
Have you seen Brave Star?
Yes.
Brave Star. Okay. Non sequitur. Okay. Yeah, I was like, this sounds familiar. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. And I think, the answer is, basically talk to people. And if you can pay people to consult, I realize not everyone's in a position where they can do that. Ideally, you would pay a consultant to look at what you've written and say, hey, is this accurate? Is this offensive? Is this a stereotype? Tell me what you can do.
I think particular for Native American. There's there are different levels, and I would say with Native Americans especially, there is no group of people that is kind of more mysticized, and also their reality just completely ignored.
Yeah, I want to focus on that trope by making the character a very literal, very.
Well, no, I think take a step back. Spend time on a reservation, actually physically, make friends. Native American people, they're just people, just to kind of talk to them and
With Native Americans, there's a very, very specific challenge because, okay, if you point out to someone that, hey, you know, the Huxtables or Oz are not, you know, blanket representations of African American life. People are going to say, well, yeah, I mean, I understand that. If you point out that, like, hey, pretty much everything you believe about Native Americans is, like, bullshit cooked up by Hollywood, they're going to be like, what?
And
you know, the white myth about Native Americans has surpassed and all but drowned out the reality of Native Americans.
I think English by listening to my heart.
Yeah. Because I think, like, that is, like, regardless of, like, the depth of the character, like, I think the most important thing that anyone can do is look at media created by, you know, for instance, Native Americans. There are, you know, films written and directed a lot, like, you know, documentaries. There are, you know, They Live, not the movie, just, like, but, like, you know, and I think that's, like, the people get so caught up in how am I doing this right, they forget, oh, research.
Just go ask.
Yeah, just ask. People are cool.
You know, research,
I mean, if you have black friends, don't ask to touch their hair, but you can ask them about their experiences and
so with the particular challenge
Same
with Native
with women.
Americans, and even with a lot of them, like, do the research. Like, I would say, don't even necessarily, like, write it and then be like, hey, how accurate is this? For some in particular, like, ask first before you even start writing. Otherwise, you're going to go and you're going to deliver something that's going to be based out of those cultural tropes that you don't even realize are so far off base that they're just going to go, like, they're not going to want to deal with it. They're just going to read it and go like, yeah.
It might be not work as well if you're like, hey, is this racist? And they're like, yeah. That's what it might be.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so I think it was one more because I got like a 5-minute warning. So
one more,
one
and then we'll see ramble.
All right, yeah, so I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. Something that I noticed, I was actually talking to Lauren about a little bit ago, is how in media right now, you, like, even more than the portrayal of LGBTQ relationships, that you can't really see an intimate male friendship without at least a joke being made that they're gay.
That bromance.
Or Sherlock, you know?
XKCD had the greatest joke on this, which was he said that the one bit of wiki vandalism that he would 100% support is just replacing, like, going to the article on bromance and replacing all instances of bromance with friendship. So friendship is when two men are, you know, willing to share their emotions with each other.
Oh, well, actually, I did a Twitter poll a few weeks ago. I'm going to talk about Transformers again because there's who reads the IDW comics? Anyone?
I at least read the summaries on the Transformers.
Okay, good enough. Okay, you know about Cyclonus and Tailgate, right?
Yeah.
So there are these two characters that are kind of like, you know, I'm a big angry guy and I'm cute and need a friend. So, like, over the course of the thing, they kind of become close and eventually become, like, you know, I don't want to say suspiciously close, but, you know, fandom goes we. And so I asked on Twitter, I was like, okay, tell me if you see this couple as friends or romantic, and also tell me your gender identity. And because I want to know if you're, like, a straight dude or a gay dude or what, or are you a woman? And it was like, and it was really interesting because I was kind of expecting the straight dudes to overwhelmingly be like bromance, and, you know, the gay dudes to be like romance, and it was like women were overwhelmingly on the romance side, but the men, regardless of their sexual orientation, were just like 50-50. And even the straight dudes were like, yeah, they're totally in love. And I was like, this is good. Like that we're at a point where straight men can see like a very ambiguous relationship that could either be close friendship or romantic.
After Brokeback Mountain came out, a lot the author of the original story received a lot of fan fiction where, like, you know, the character, like, one of the characters is still alive at the end, and like how, like, he, like, meets a new boyfriend and they are happy together, and most of those stories were written by straight men, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah. So okay.
We have to wrap up.
Yeah.
But sorry, one last.
Oh really? Okay.
Sorry?
Well, we need to. Yeah, I need to go upstairs anyway.
Oh, okay.
But
in reference to what you were talking about, I think that's a really good example of how the same systems that oppress LGBT people also make life kind of worse for straight white guys, in that you can't have friendships if your idea of what being a man is restricts you from having a close relationship with other people.
Yeah, like the no homo. It's like the need to stick that in there, which was kind of why I was surprised. Like
That's what she said.
I walked right into that one. I'm sorry, but that was what kind of surprised, because I kind of went in with the conception that like part of why the idea of bromance is such a thing was you see, I feel like a lot of straight men feel the need for, like vulnerability and emotional intimacy, not necessarily in a sexual way, like just they want to feel close, and this is why, but they also are so threatened by this idea of being like the gay panic and being accused of just because you're really close to someone.
What if showing emotions means I'm gay?
Yeah, but I do think that's changing. Like even I guess maybe Transformers fans aren't the greatest sample pool, but like, or maybe they are. I don't know. You'd think it'd be a bunch of like dumb like bros, but that like all the straight dudes, or like it was like half and half. Like no, yeah. And I was like, I think that's really interesting that like straight men are not threatened by emotional intimacy as much as they used to be, and they're also not threatened by the idea of like a homosexual relationship, and like it could go either way. But that's just one example, and I guess the point I'm babbling towards is no homo. I don't know.
Or maybe like, and we don't have an answer for this, but is it that because there is more diversity in media now for LGBT relationships and characters?
Well, I think the idea of no homo has been called out enough that people are kind of like, yeah, okay, it is kind of lame that we need to quantify that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it's not still stigmatized. And then that's kind of why we end up having like these angry online movements where it's just like they can't express themselves in a healthy way, so we got to do it with angry.
Yeah. One recommendation, if you want, like on that specific subject, if you want to do more reading, there's an excellent book came out 2 years ago called Angry White Men by Michael Kimmel. Highly recommend reading it. It's a pretty easy read, too.
Also, Captain Holt in Brooklyn Nine-Nine is a goddamn treasure.
Thank you so much, guys, for coming. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you for staying long. Yeah. You guys have been the best panel we've had here, or the best I've been here.
Yes, this is great.
You're the real representation in the media.